Okay, so our recording has started. So welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. Really excited that we can welcome today Nick Sinclair, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Medway NHS Foundation Trust, and also welcome Carl Davies, who's the Solutions and Strategy Director at TeleTracking. And this is an in-partnership Lunch and Learn session. So we're really proud in being able to bring you learning and insights where organisations have made significant changes or are on the journey to transformational change around improving and supporting patient flow and managing demand, but also capacity that goes with that. So we've got the next 45, 50 minutes together. I always like to start just by, first of all, sharing. I've said who I am. Hopefully everyone is familiar with myself. So again, I'm Emma and I'm the chair and founder of Proud to be Ops. And anyone who is active on socials, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's X, please do tag us in, share any of the learning and the insights from this session that you do have. And also let's continue to help recognise and celebrate some of the fantastic work that's happening across our operational teams and particularly across our health and care services. So please do actively get into that. We always like to remind each other of our values and behaviours as a network. So we've been established now for a good number of years, and our success as a network really underpinned by our values and behaviours. So when we all come into these spaces together, we aim to have open, honest, safe and supportive conversations. So with that, we respect each other's voice in the room. We actively listen with intent to be curious, to learn. We demonstrate compassion and kindness. And actually, we use this space to create ideas, generate curiosity, which will hopefully help us as operational managers and leaders consider how we can keep continually improving back in our organisations and the services that we provide for patients. So please let's respect each other in the space this next 45, 50 minutes, and let's have an open, thriving and safe conversation together. So I think it's always important that we do just recognise that at the beginning of each of our sessions. Just to let you know how we're going, so we're now well over 1,500 members at a senior operational management and leadership level across the NHS. And we're also launching across NHS Trust themselves, where we've already launched in 8 organisations, and we've already got for Q4 and Q1 a number of other organisations signed up. So our spread and scale continues, and that's a massive thank out to everyone who's been involved in that. We do have sharing non-elective stuff, a series of sessions of which TeleTracking and organisations have already been actively supporting. And if you do have any ideas and you wish to come forward with some suggestions, share some of the work in your own organisations, then please do use that QR code and get in touch with us. We're always looking to hear of some of the fantastic work that's happening across our provider organisations. So please do get in touch. I will say as well that we are going to be sharing everything that we go through today. So all of the slides, all of the contact information, along with the video link as well of the recording of the session. So those who like to frantically take notes, like I do as well, and write them down, you will equally get the opportunity to have it back digitally as well. So just to confirm that. So what is on the horizon? What's coming up for us as a network? We've got our continued series of Lunch and Learn sessions in partnership with TeleTracking, but also NHS Trust. Our next one up and coming is on the 3rd of April, where we'll be learning of the improvements around flow and capacity management from Sean Briggs, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells. And then on the 15th of April, we'll also be welcoming Tom Jackson, who's the head of our ops at Countess of Chester. So we're really going to be hearing some practical examples of operational delivery and improvement. So some real good nuggets here for people to take away and then to carry on those conversations with those leaders that are involved in these solutions. Just to make you aware that we also have our training and webinar series through our website, and we've got a series up and coming starting in April, which will be around Proud to be Ops does data and information. We've also got some sessions on demystifying finance, along with our ongoing national sessions that we run. And then the 2nd of May, we'll be running our first in-person event of the year, which will be a smaller gathering where we'll be focusing on the development of operational managers. And then towards the end of the year, we will be having our first Proud to be Ops annual congress and introducing our Proud to be Ops awards as well. So it's going to be our largest event of the year, where we expect around 250 people coming together from senior, operational and director leadership roles. So a great opportunity to get involved in that as well. So there's a little bit of an intro from me, and hopefully that's warmed us all up for an engaging conversation. What I will say, these sessions work really well if we interact with each other, we be curious, we ask questions. If some are a bit little more hesitant to come forward, pop it in the chat box. I'll happily field that to our guests here today, but please do pop your hands up. We're all ops, we're not scared to have a voice, surely not. So please do actively engage in the conversation during the next 45-50 minutes. So without further ado, I am going to welcome Nick, Chief Operating Officer at Medway NHS Foundation Trust, and Carl, who's also the Solutions Director at TeleTracking. And they're going to share some of the insights of their partnership and collaboration. And then we're going to go into some curious feedback, questions and answers as well. So over to you, Carl and Nick, and I will be the one who you can do next slide to. So please do shout up and I'll go for it.
Okay, thanks, Emma, and thanks everyone for their time. Nick, do you want to just introduce yourself properly?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I'm Nick, Chief Operating Officer here at Medway NHS Foundation Trust. And Emma, I moved from the ivory tower into my coordination centre for you, because I thought that'd be more appropriate.
Yeah, I like it. I'm just wondering though, Nick, why is no one moving in the background? Is it an active command centre?
Perfect. Right. Well, so and just to give you a bit of background on myself, I'm Carl Davies. I'm, like Emma said, the Solutions and Strategy Director at TeleTracking. I am a clinician by background, worked for many years in the NHS, and then into senior operational and strategic management through the NHS into ICS, ICB's ICS world, and lived and breathed kind of ops on the ground, and then joined TeleTracking about 2 years ago. And I've been part of the team in the UK for 2 years now. The next slide. Okay, just to give anybody who doesn't know, just a bit of background on TeleTracking Technologies, what we do. We operate an operational and logistics platform that takes a large number of single point solutions that will help support the patient on the journey all the way through the hospital and in between patients, the time in between patients, and then it brings all of those solution products together as a single solution around what we call Care Co-ordination Centres that will help track all of the different changes that happen across the system. We'll talk a little bit more about as we go, and we then broaden that out into ICS wide solutions so that we get visibility of kind of bed management, bed capacity management more broadly outside of the system as well. Nick, you want Medway?
Yeah. Oh, just to go back a bit, Emma. Thanks. So Medway, just as a bit of context for you, is a single-sited acute trust predominantly. I think Medway, you might well have heard of Medway, given its kind of history and how it's been in the news. I think predominantly Medway has been an entirely non-elective site, has really struggled with delivering elective care because it was overwhelmed by non-elective activity, and really didn't have the full sort of oversight of its capacity and how we could best place and best move patients so that they can receive the care they need. I think, you know, those emergency department attendances are a little bit out of date, I'd suggest. I think we just need to check those numbers, because it feels like we have that every day, although it's obviously not quite that bad. But for a single-sited acute trust, you know, we regularly see over 600 attendances every day to the emergency department. So it's, you know, it's a big number, and we are circa around 5,000 staff now, grown since that number, but that would include our sort of temporary bank staff. So yeah, for a single site, it's quite a busy one.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Next slide, please, Emma. So just to give a little bit more context in terms of how the platform adds value, what we looked at is what are the interactions that take place across the system, and it is a highly complex system in healthcare, and all of those interactions happen and in some way change what happens with the care of the patient along that journey. And that can be just an operational timestamp, it can be clinical changes, but having visibility of all of those different changes in real time as they happen across the system is obviously extremely powerful and helps support effective decision making across the system. And so what we try and do is consider all of the different workflows that support the patient across the journey. So this isn't just about bed management, and that sometimes can be confusing. It isn't really just about just the bed itself and how we use the bed. It's about fully supporting the patient with all of the things that they need across the journey and giving full visibility of all of those steps across all of the different workflows. So if we just go on to the next slide. So it presents a series of delays essentially when you don't have visibility in that system. So there is the delays in processing time, so the time it takes to support the patient on their journey, so all of those individual steps. Then there is the time it takes for information regarding changes to the care or to the operational timestamps to reach the decision maker, the right people to make the right decisions. Then there is what we call the preparation time, so the time it takes to make the bed available for the next patient to occupy, and often that we refer to that as idle bedtime. There could be a significant amount of time lost in the system there between patients. And then the transport time, the time it takes to move patients or equipment around the hospital. And so all of that information around all of those different areas of delays can be captured, and then we can start to understand where we have times for improvement. Where are we experiencing pressure in the system? What are clinicians being expected to chase through additional telephone calls or additional work? And actually, where can we support removal of the additional administrative burden so that we can have effective real-time understanding of situational awareness across the whole of the system? Next slide, please. And so when you, I'm interested to know from people in listening that as to what the kind of state is in terms of how all of those different logistical processes are currently captured, because historically it's often with paper and people having to chase information around the system, and we only really chase very superficial layers of that information. And so we usually, when we coordinate it, often it's very superficial, or it can be out of date already by the time we get to the point of decision making, and an awful lot of time is spent physically moving around the hospital trying to chase information, or actually just writing those things down, phone calls and relaying information. And so although this looks like a busy, complex system, it really underplays the complexity of all of those kind of real-time flows. And what we try and do through the solution, and you'll see some of the pictures as we go through and the impact, is make sure the right information is with the right people at the right time to support the patient's care journey. Because fundamentally, this is about how do we ensure that operational changes and impacts and delays don't impact on the care quality that we deliver for the patient. And so when we don't have that information, you know, the impact is we get reduced bed capacity, we're inefficient in terms of some of the processes that we employ, we delay with either admittance or discharge of patients, and it ultimately has a negative impact on quality of care. Next page.
And you get really frustrated coups and ops managers.
Indeed. And so what we try and do, and this is probably again a simplification just so that we can kind of explain how the system adds value and what we try and drive towards. We separate out areas of focus across the whole of the system so that we can understand how do we make improvements in time so that we remove the administrative burden for people across that journey. So we tend to have an ability to quantify all those different areas, and then we can bring that up. It will have an impact on either length of stay, the time the patient's in the bed, not physically in the bed, but actually in the hospital in their episode of care, and the time between patients, so the time out of the bed in what we call idle bedtime. And then by managing to kind of capture that time, quantify that time, we can then work in partnership with the likes of Nick in terms of how it might be useful to reallocate that capacity towards strategic goals around quality, cost and performance. And I think this is where certainly the partnership really comes into its own, and why it's so important is because there is an element of people and process alongside the technologies we all know, which will determine our ability to release time from the system in the first instance, but it's even more powerful when we continue to work in partnership in terms of the longer term strategic goals. So we don't just see it as a core operational benefit, it becomes a strategic enabler for much larger scale change when we get this right. Next slide. And so, I mean, Nick's got one behind his head and you'll see this, but bringing this together in terms of a Care Co-ordination Centre is really just about making sure that all of the different people, and I'll let Nick talk through who kind of sits in the room or how this all comes together, but fundamentally, everyone that has a role with managing that patient across the whole of that journey has some level of connectedness now to others that are influential or impact on that system. So, Nick, I'll hand over to you, and you, by all means, talk through the rest.
Thank you. And we'll get to some stats and things in just a minute. But I think if you're going to consider doing this, don't ever underestimate. Thank you, Leon. Sorry. Chief People Officer just delivering me a cup of tea. It's lovely, isn't it? He looks after us, the Chief People Officer. Don't ever underestimate. If you're going to do something like this is a major structural fundamental change to the way you run operations. So as Carl says, you know, this room that we've got a picture of here, that is my coordination centre. I'm kind of fortunate. It's at the site we've got here, we've got a number of sort of outbuildings that are separate from the physical main site. So my coordination centre is in those outbuildings, one of them, out the way. So they aren't interrupted by normal, you know, flow and people popping in and having a chat and all that sort of thing. It's very much set up, if you kind of imagine like a police command centre or an ambulance 999 centre, they are out the way, and everybody in there has a part to play in a patient either being admitted, moved through the system or discharged. So in the room, it's run by one of our senior clinical site managers. So, you know, we've all got them, experienced nurses generally, who know about our sites and know how to run the hospital. So they're in charge in the room, and they have the big seat that sees everything. Either side of those, they have what we've termed, you know, bed placement specialists. These are non-clinical staff that operate the system for them. And then also in the room, we have a facilities supervisor, because bed cleaning, bed turnaround, porters are absolutely fundamental to the bloods being picked up from the ward to get to the lab, so that they're in the lab quickly, so the lab can test them, so the doctor can get the answer back, or the nurse, in order to proceed to the next action. So what we monitor, it's a bit like Uber for porters is the way we kind of describe it. It's automated dispatcherless portering system where jobs are on the system for them to do, and it's a bit like, as I say, you order your Uber, you order your porter, and the system will allocate that to the nearest porter who's available to get to that place quickest. However, we have a facilities supervisor that monitors and oversees that, because if the site manager who's in charge says, well, actually, those samples can wait because I need that patient moved to that bed because that's going to give me the one from resus into ITU, they just override that system and make that change. And we also have a dedicated bed turnaround team because we here and in my previous organisation, we paid nursing staff to clean beds, which is A, really expensive, B, there aren't enough nurses in the country, so why we'd want them doing tasks that isn't nursing, I don't know. And it kind of devalues nursing, and it says, you know, that's not a highly professional skill. So we have a dedicated bed turnaround team that are experts in cleaning. They're experts in infection control standards and knowing what level of clean that bed needs, and they go and do it via the system and their phone, which is how they get their jobs. Also sat in that room is we have representatives as required from our transport provider, so that we know that we can rejig transport based on discharge demands on which beds we want first. And then we also have our emergency planning team, because if we stand up an incident at any point, then that incident gets run from that room because that is the room that has the oversight of the entire hospital, of everything that's coming in, everything that's going out, and everything that we need to move around. So any incident is managed from that room as well. So we have EPRR advisors. So that's kind of the room, and that's the purpose of the room. So if we just whiz on to the next slide. We at Medway have our overall sort of trust strategy, and that's underpinned by what we call patient first, which is our improvement methodology. We are transitioning to stop calling it improvement methodology, but this is our management system. So our management system is improvement. And this is where the partnership with TeleTracking particularly really works, in that what Tele provides us is the data analytics information of what our current position is, and then we, as the experts in ops and nursing and clinicians and our medics, will then make those informed decisions on improvement. So we absolutely underpin all of our improvement through our strategy. Okay, so let's get on to some of the benefits, and then I think this is probably going to drive some of the conversation, hopefully. So we went live 10th of October last year. That was go live date. So we switched everything else off and switched this on at 7 o'clock in the morning on the 10th of October, and we went live. That was following Dan's going to correct me, I'm going to say 22 weeks, Dan. He's yeah, 22-week project from sort of signing contract to going live. So it's a fairly rapid, given that you're fundamentally changing how you operate. And so we just did a bit of looking, and this particular patient on the 28th of November, so, you know, only 5 or 6 weeks in, previously, it would have taken that patient around 4 hours from someone leaving a bed for them to get from ED to that bed. And in just over 5 weeks, we were doing it in half the time. So if you can shave 2 hours off patients waiting in your emergency department for a bed that is empty and available, but nobody knew about it, why wouldn't we? Because that helps overcrowding of ED. Now, our accountants, the CFOs, they love to put numbers on these sorts of things, and I think we'll probably get to numbers in a bit, but we'll save that. So if we go on to the next one, because I think that's, you know, that's an individual patient. So when you start then multiplying that up, I admit probably around, if you include SDEC, probably around 100 people a day, which is, you know, 2 hours, 100 times. It's a lot of time. So our KPIs that we started tracking. Previous to this, previous to go live, it was whiteboards, you know, with pens and bits of paper and all that sort of thing. Once we'd gone in, at go live, we only knew about a third of our discharges via our tele system. So using our improvement methodology and working with our teams, within 6 weeks, we were up to 60%. So we knew of 60% of all of the people leaving the building, we knew in advance, which I don't know about you, but if you've been running site and operations, you get all sorts of surprise empty beds that nobody knew about. And that number's now got better from 60%. The time, that 2-hour time, that's, you know, we're at 6 weeks. Every patient was a 37% improvement in that time from an empty bed to getting to it. And we released, because part of the TeleTracking system, we use real-time location badges and an automated discharge process. So no need to use PAS or any of that. It's simply throw a badge in a box, job done. At go live, we were only at 25% of our discharges went out via the Dropbox process, but that gave us 6 hours of empty bed time a day. We're now regularly up to 18, 20 hours a day saved. So that's just time that was there, but you didn't know, every single day. So you start then multiplying that up into the month, and it's huge. Every bed from the moment a patient leaves that bed is ready for use in average of 68 minutes. Now that will include your fogs and UV cleans and, you know, the ones that take longer. So we're averaging 68 minutes. We know that was around 2.5 hours before we put this system in. So, you know, again, huge improvement. And our porters on average take 29 minutes to do every job. That's from request to finished, not 29 minutes walking with a patient. The hospital's not that big. Next slide, Emma. Some of our metrics, we've absolutely moved our time of discharge to the left. Is absolutely earlier in the day. You can see there 13% of the discharges before 10 a.m. We've moved our discharge time at the moment 2.5 hours earlier every day on average, which is huge. And a massive benefit to those patients waiting in the emergency department. And, you know, we track this sort of thing routinely. So you can see there 10 to 3 was our average discharge time at that point. And you can see our confirmed discharge compliance at 59% and Dropbox at 36%. As I say, they have improved since we did this review. Next slide. This one for me is key, and I think these are some of the bits that we miss, and this is where facilities teams often aren't considered as part of operations. They're not considered as part of delivering patient care. But as I say, we used to pay nurses to clean beds, and we don't now, and that's giving us 50 hours of nursing time, which is now back into delivering care or doing nursing related tasks every single day. Now, the benefit of that, personally, and I'd be interested if anyone's got any views, because I'm really struggling of how I quantify what gets done with that 50 hours a day that we're giving back, because what I haven't done is said, well, you've got 50 hours a day back, so that's one nurse per one nurse less on these wards because we've released the time. We've left the staffing levels as they are, because the important bit is about delivering care. So how I quantify what 50 hours a day does, yeah, maybe. I don't want to reduce staffing. What I want to do is improve productivity, improve patient care, improve the speed that patients get the care they need. But, you know, the 50% improvement. That's, yeah, another good one. And we have got some good levels of patient satisfaction. Next slide. It's worth me checking actually what they were before October. And for the accountants that aren't in the room, but if the accountants were in the room, at our 6-week review, if we did no more improvement, and we have improved, but if we did no more improvement, we had a £1.2 million return on investment, which the system did not cost me £1.2 million. Now, what does that kind of turn into? As I said about Medway, Medway was an entirely emergency care driven organisation. Elective care was stopped. Our day surgery unit had non-elective inpatients in. Theatre recovery had non-elective inpatients in, everything. This year, for the first year, through winter, we've not stopped any elective procedures at all due to capacity. So we delivered the equivalent of 119% of the ERF target, and we've ploughed through, and our day case unit has been functioning as a day case unit since November, and we're now in the top 10 of our theatre productivity times, and our day case rates are on the up to where we need them to be. So, you know, those are some of the, I guess you'd say, sort of byproducts of what I've chosen to reinvest. The benefits I've got. I didn't close wards as the CFOs would like, you know, close wards, cut spend. We didn't do that. What we did was we delivered care for patients, and because to me that's quite important. Next one, which is the last one, you'll be pleased to know, I think. Oh no, it's not quite. This is just kind of a bit of a comparison. So before we had more than 6 systems. If you do PAS, EPR, BI systems, and then you had bits of paper, and then you had Outlook diaries, and then you had all sorts of things. We've got rid of all of that. We've got one system. I've said it's already dispatcherless, so there's automation in the system that doesn't require human intervention, which is fantastic. So as an example of that, patients in the emergency department or theatre recovery or wherever they are that need to be moved to another bed, they place a bed request. Our coordination centre allocate the bed. The system knows when the bed is ready for that patient and then automatically orders the porters. So nobody needs to do anything. The porters arrive and say, I'm here for Dave, let's go. Whereas in the old systems, when it was phone calls and people had to notice and all of that, that's where you get your efficiency. So we now have one system that does our logistics, if you like, the logistics side of patient movement, a team culture that is built around bringing MDTs, the coordination centre, together around delivering our board round process and ensuring that everybody knows. And we drive the improvement through our patient first. So we have full engagement from our ward levels right the way up to the boardroom and the ivory tower that I've removed. And yeah, so I think, you know, it's been a massive journey for us to do as an organisation, from one that was extremely challenged to really sort of cutting edge of patient logistics and patient movement. And I have to say, I'm incredibly lucky to have seriously engaged people that want to do the right thing for patients, and that shows in, you know, the KPIs and the metrics we've delivered. We're definitely on the last one now. So I guess my reflections, my conclusions. Patient flow, if we want to sort of badge it like that, is really, really difficult, and Carl's outlined it's really, really complex. If my view, and it's just my view, is if you tinker around at the edges, you're not really going to get the result. You need someone who's going to be brave. And believe me, trying to get these business cases through execs and boards before I was an exec, I had to put myself out there and put a whole bunch of personal risk, because there wasn't really many people in the country doing this. So I've had to go for international kind of best practice. And you get all the, well, the NHS can't do that. You know, it's different in America, it's different in the Netherlands, it's different. Well, actually, we can. So you got to be brave. And if you want to make a big difference, you got to do something big. Don't mess around with, you know, we're going to reduce 2 bits of paper to 1. You know, you got to go and do something fundamental. I didn't say at the beginning, my background is 21 years operational in the ambulance service, and the ambulance service, being as it is entirely data driven. And when you come to an acute sector and you've got bits of paper and whiteboards with no data, well, how do you ever measure how efficient you are and where your blockages are in the system? So until you've got a system like this, and I'm not just going to say TeleTracking because there are other providers out there, but I've got TeleTracking. If you don't have a system that gets those data points, you cannot see where your waste and inefficiency is in the process, because it's just gone. So you have to capture the data points, and then the next trick is use those data points for improvement. Don't have fancy screens on the wall like this and do nothing with them. You've actually got to use the information that they provide. And I have to say, Dan, wherever Dan is my executive account manager, works for Tele, and he has an improvement background as well. Watch his TED talk, it's really good. Plug for you, Dan. I think we have to look at, and we regularly look at our data, look at where our problems are, and we put in improvements and we see if it works. If it doesn't work, well, we'll go and do something different. And the one thing I would say about Tele is it is a true partnership. You know, Dan's almost got a desk next to me in my office. He's down that regularly, and, you know, we work that closely together. We speak every single week on what his insights are on what we're doing with his product in order for us to improve and get better. Carl and I have a much more strategic relationship, and the work around ICS is the work that we work on. And I would never advocate finding a company that gives you a solution that they then only meet you from a contract management point of view, because you're never going to get the best out of it. I've asked Dan numerous times for developments in the system, and bearing in mind this is in lots of hospitals in North America, so we're small fry in the whole kind of organisation. I've got the changes I need, which has improved patient outcomes and care, because we know it's the right thing to do and we've got the evidence to do it, and the organisation is prepared to back us to do the right thing for patients. So partnership is absolutely critical to what we do in operations, because I don't believe we can do it all ourselves. We need experts like Carl and Dan and the team at Tele and EPR providers. I nearly said EMR providers. That's gone American. We can't do it on our own, but what we also can't accept is providers that just give you what you get and you have to live with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just echo it in terms of it's a big part of our philosophy at TeleTracking. I think, you know, people often talk about people, process and technology, but you have to, from a technology perspective, back that up and not just be a kind of, we're dropped in the technology and disappear and it's yours to then make sense of. The reality is it's a hugely transformative system. Like Nick has said, it's a complex task in terms of changing your internal structures and process. We commit to that in partnership. The whole team really here is built around either former clinicians or operational leads within the NHS. So everybody has experience around understanding the impact on the ground and the driven by wanting to sort of support the patient. So it's a fundamental part of our philosophy in terms of the partnership, and we think we get most value for yourselves and us out of working together on those complex challenges. So yeah, many thanks to Nick as always for all of the hard work and the support that we get from you, and open to questions.
Thank you so much, Nick and Carl, for sharing. I think we have got a few questions in the chat box. There was a few things that really struck out for me. There was around the significant infrastructure change that is required to actually really gain the benefits, both from a patient perspective experience, but also in terms of value adding experience. You can call it productivity, financial, other, but it's the value adding aspects of the care that we deliver. I also heard around being brave and bold, and actually to make a fundamental infrastructure change, you've got to be brave and you've got to be bold. But I think what I'm also considering with that is, how do you therefore have your allies to help you be big and bold and brave? Because it is important in that aspect. It's not just as simple as be brave. Actually, you do need a form of allyship. And the last thing I really gathered there was the partnership approach. Actually working with a partner who fundamentally comes from the point of, this is people change, this is cultural change, and with that there are system changes and there are structural changes. But don't forget the first important element, which is the people and the cultural change to this, because without that you can't change processes and structure. And I think that's what I heard and sensed from what you've both shared around the collaboration that you've got working together. So we've got about 10-15 minutes max, so I'm going to field some questions if I may. One really, and let's try and do a bit of a quick fire on this so we get them all in. The first one is, and I'll ask Carl and then Nick, do you think that a care coordination centre is critical to success? Carl?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it depends in what context you mean that. Can you achieve value from the system if you don't have a care coordination centre? Absolutely. But having some form of genuine commitment to coordinating the care in this way across the whole of the system, it's hugely important. It's probably one of the most important things that impact on patient care that we often don't necessarily give the credit to how impactful that can be. So yes, absolutely is the answer from my perspective.
Yeah. Nick, from your experience?
I can be shorter than that. Yes, can't do it without it.
Yeah, thank you. So another question that's coming from Katie Beckford, and it is with regards, are there any community trusts that have done something similar with this from a district nursing, community wards, virtual wards perspective? So I can see Nick and Carl nodding. Does one of you want to respond?
Yeah, so virtual ward capacity is all on our system, so we can see the virtual ward capacity. I've done this twice, and in the previous organisation, we put the whole of Kent Community NHS Foundation Trust onto Tele. So at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells, they have a coordination centre. They have visibility of all of the community beds in real time for the hospitals that they have access to. And we reduced the time from moving a patient to that community bed by in excess of 1 day by having it visible and having a more automated referral and transfer process. I'm in the process of putting my community capacity online here. And then when that comes online, we've pretty much got the whole of Kent's community capacity, as well as 2 of the major acute providers in the county as well.
Brilliant. So it's building it, kind of getting the foundations on there, making sure that's working effectively, and then keep building so you've got that wider health and care view. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Question is, have you seen any reduction in agency spend through this solution? Nick, particularly, I guess.
I mean, agency spend, we're only at about 2% anyway. We don't really use agency, only for, we have a problem in midwifery where we use a lot of high cost agency. But generally we don't use agency. I mean, temporary staffing has gone down slightly. But like I said, it's not, for me, this is not about removing staff. This is about improving process.
Thank you. Katie, you just popped your hand up. Is there anything you'd like to come in?
No, so yeah, the reduction in agency spend and reduction in length of stay was in response to Nick's question around what he could potentially look at to see if any quantitative or qualitative data regarding impact.
Thank you. And Katie, you also was curious around, did you see significant reduction in length of stay?
Again, in response to Nick's question that he put out, that Lisa's also said with satisfaction and Datix.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
Length of stay, yes, we have. We have reduced length of stay with this. You know, some of it in hours, but if it's, you know, if it's 3 or 4 hours for every patient, you know, that's a significant length of stay reduction. And that's where some of that 1.2 million after 6 weeks comes in. But I don't know whether Dan's recrunched any numbers recently, but we are well exceeding that now. As I say, we've maintained day case surgery unit, my dedicated orthopedic joint ward is ring fenced for joints, which it never used to be. And we're managing elective surgery through surgical beds as well, which we didn't before. So that's kind of the length of stay benefit, is the 119% ERF.
Yeah, brilliant, which is great results, really is great results. Thank you. Lisa, over to you, please, if you want to introduce yourself and ask the curious question.
Thank you. So I'm Lisa Forweather. I'm the Group Operational Readiness Lead. We are putting in an electric patient flow solution in 98 days. Not that we're on countdown. So, so this is really, really interesting. A question I've put in the chat, Nick, is, you know, it's not just about the system, it's about the adoption and it's about the change of the processes and things like that. How did you manage to get the teams on board to want to change and to make the improvements?
So, I mean, that's a really good question, and I might let Dan chip in after I've spoken. I know he's not a presenter, but he helped. It's about, you know, if when we went to talk to the clinicians, you know, what clinicians want is the patients they can treat. Mm-hmm. So the only way for me that you can understand and have an oversight of your site to make sure that the right patients get to the right place is by having a system like this. So I kind of promised them that I will get them the patients that they need in order to, and want, in order to treat their patients. So we've reduced medical outliers in surgery. We get patients to the right bed first time more often than before. I won't say every time. That's my ultimate aim. But, you know, we get patients to them. When I started here, you weren't allowed to, I mean, I find this fascinating, you weren't allowed to admit a patient to the ward unless the consultant said that was okay, which I found a bit bizarre. And so that's where I've come from to, as we go through the process of deployment, and this is where I want Dan to come in, we make those promises and we sign up to those as exec sponsor. There's the SROs and the divisional teams that actually agree to the changes in workflow process. Dan, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to mention, hi everybody, I'm Dan, I'm Nick's account manager for TeleTracking. I'll be super quick because I know I'm not a speaker, but thanks, Nick. Yeah, I think the engagement sessions throughout the delivery, I just wanted to mention that at TeleTracking, we pride ourselves on not a technical implementation, it's definitely a transformational implementation. So we're really heavy on making it fun, making it engaging, showing people through the automation how it's going to make their jobs easier, because that's what they want to know. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. We make it really, fun sessions. We do lots of pop-up bits and pieces, but crucially, from go live as well, we kind of work on that adoption and optimization piece. So we revisit them and really help drive that forward.
Yeah. So let's, promise to give them what they want. So they want their patients in their wards, and then, stick by those promises. So, I said, I know I will release nursing time back to care. Well, we've done that, so it's about be honest, and, again, sort of manage kind of the expectations with honesty around this is not going to be perfect on day one. And in fact, day one might well be, horrible. But, we will get better at this as we go through. And particularly the coordination centre can only do what it does if the information is fed from the wards. So the other promise I made was if you put on the system discharge readiness, confirmed discharges or query discharges, then I promise to never phone you to ask who's going home today and when are they going home, because I know. If you don't put it on, well, then I'll bother you. And it's kind of getting into those sorts of contracts, if you like, and sticking to them, no matter how much you might want to go back to ring every ward and find out what their discharges are. Just stick to your promises and go with it.
And
Thank you so much.
Just to
Thank you,
add,
Lisa. And I think that's a real behavioural change, isn't it? And actually that contracting in with each other on a personal leadership, professional level. And I'm very mindful because we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. And I think there is another question in there, which is from Steve Funnell. Steve, I don't know if you want to come forward. Is there anything over and above what Nick and Carl have already shared around this momentum for wards to discharge sooner in the day rather than later? I'm not sure if Steve's... Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, it's really just not without getting into the weeds of it. I'm just curious to just tease that out a little bit more, because it's a common theme, certainly in our bed meetings at Lewisham and Greenwich, around discharges, query discharges identified earlier in the day that fall off. And where they fall off for reasons other than clinical, and it might be because of ward pressures, it might be because of liaising with getting, accommodation ready, community services and this and that. How does the system support the site team in getting momentum from the wards and the ward team in having that focus? I mean, it's interesting your comment regarding contracting with the ward. There's a benefit that if they update and engage with the system, they'll get less pressure and workload and pressure from the site team. How does the system help facilitate that, perhaps from a ward perspective?
Digital board rounding. So if you do your board round using the system, then everybody who needs to know knows. So if we put on there that there's a delay for a pathway 1 discharge because of this reason, well, then the IDT team pick that up automatically because they can see and they can chase. You get earlier discharges purely through the automation and the real-time location technology that comes with it. So you kind of automatically get that for nothing, if you like. But the real trick is around using the system for board rounding in a digital way, provides, like on the screens here behind me, the information around discharge processes and what our blocks are, and then the right people pick up those blocks.
Yeah, just to add, I think there's 2 bits for me in terms of there's novel data capture in the system, which is not traditionally captured, and so we can help support that across either the ward or visibility and the central site team. And then there is integrative function with other systems, so that any change that happens across the board you can see in real time at both ward level and at the coordination centre level. So as an example, you think about the number of patients on an hourly basis having a change in status of, say, imaging, whether the imaging has been done, whether it's been actioned, reported, you'll see all of those changes in real time. So that'll inform your board round, it'll inform the internal process, and all of that information is then fed into the central site team. So you'll have real visibility, and if you wanted to, a number of patients waiting for TTOs only to be discharged, you'd have full visibility of that at the central site team. So the team can then dedicate support to the areas that might need it, and then support the wards back through interaction and action that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for putting that question forward as well. So we are coming towards the end of our session. I want to just say a big thank you to both Nick and the team across Medway NHS Foundation Trust and Carl from TeleTracking for sharing your collaboration and partnership work today. There's some really fundamental improvements that you've made there, and I think all credit to everyone in the organisation and the team for actually being brave, sticking to the plan, and really underpinned by the cultural change and behavioural change as well. So huge thank you to Nick and Carl for today's session. To confirm, we will be making the slides available to everyone, and there'll also be, within the next few days, a link to the recording of the session. And in there will be Nick and Carl's details if you wanted to directly get in touch with them to follow up, to explore a little bit more, but also maybe an offer of a visit, I think also might be available as well at Medway. So please do interact and engage with that and encourage your teams to get involved. So thank you, Nick, and thank you, Carl, for today's session. And thank you, Dan, as well from afar, for joining in there and adding to it, and the rest of the team that's been involved in planning today's session. And for you all for being curious and asking questions. That's what these sessions are all about, and connecting you with these innovations and opportunities to keep improving the services that we deliver. Anyone that has got anything they'd like to hear more of, please do get in touch with us via the survey, QR code it. And again, this will be shared, then please do. We're always open to learn and celebrate the successes. Also, keep an eye out on our website as we add events and sessions to it on a regular basis. And also, that's the things that you can access for you and your senior operational teams. All that's left for me to say as your chair and founder, Emma, thank you very much for participating in today. And we hope we're going to see you in the upcoming sessions as well in the next number of weeks and months ahead of us. So thank you very much, everyone. And I wish you all a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.